Sebastián Mejía, co-founder and CSO of Rappi. It's a process that it's highly intuitive for me, very, very intuitive. I sometimes feel it and it's like a gut or I don't know, I just believe in it and I tend to go hard on that route, but it's not a very structured, like reasoned process for me. It's a lot more intuitive. That's my case. Many of the challenges around e-commerce were not being addressed, like the logistics was not being built, payments was a real issue, the user experience was not good, and we were not seeing these partners of us, these retailers actually solving that, because they have a different experience and their first principles are not technology or innovation. So at that moment we said, okay, well, why don't we do it ourselves? We already have the front-end technology. Building the backend is going to be super easy. We just put some guys delivering stuff. Of course, it's zero easy. And at that moment, we actually built a startup. Rappi was born as an experiment that we were financing from our own savings from the other company, from our pocket. So that was really challenging because you're basically starting a startup in the middle of another startup, putting two hats, trying to make sure that this experiment is going to keep alive without having all of the resources to do it. So we almost destroyed at one point the two companies, but at the end they ended up working pretty well. But that moment I remember as being a challenging one. Any type of large, chaotic city in Latin America, living is challenging and there's a lot of pains. Like living your routine can be painful. Especially if you don't have access to services and products that make that life easier. That was a key aspect of us starting Rappi. We wanted to create a lot of life quality and impact the life of our consumers. That was extremely important. Rappi, we see it as an enabler, and it's only an enabler for your life, but it's also an enabler for businesses that work with us. But it's constantly in innovation and it's constantly changing, and we're constantly taking that feedback and making it better. So it's a very flexible solution. Sometimes that flexibility brings a lot of challenges because operationally you cannot standardize everything. But I wouldn't imagine Rappi without being that anything you want, super, which is also a culture, right? Like you take a Brazilian or you take a Colombian or a Mexican, we're naturally improvisers. We are flexible, we are never on time, and we like to just do crazy things, and that's us, right? So even when we started the business, I always remember that we were not trying to mimic anyone, right? We were not copying a company in the US. We were trying to solve for something that was very unique to our continent, very unique to our cities. That's how people live. Like the mustache actually comes from the mom and pop store owner, who was our inspiration. So it's I think it's a great example of how Latin American cities function. And that's also where the source of the idea comes from. If I was to summarize what is the mission of Rappi, or the missions, I would say quality of life for consumers. I would say social impact for our couriers. We have more than 18,000 couriers today that are able to make a better living. And I think in a continent with so much unemployment or lack of solid employment opportunities, this is very transformational, and we put them in the center. 100% of what consumers pay goes to them. We don't take anything from that. They can pay their houses, they can pay their universities, they can support their families. Some of them can make 3 times, 4 times their minimum wage. So I think that's very transformational. And the third one is that I believe it's time that we start believing that we can build first-class technologies in Latin America, and that innovation in Latin America can be homegrown in innovation coming from, developed countries, for example. I think it's possible. Article now on The Economist, I don't know if you read it, about Silicon Valley. It's called Peak Valley. And they're asking that question, is it Silicon Valley like peaking? And they give a great analogy of I think there was an auction to buy the basement where Hewlett Packard was built. You know, like before that was the story, you build tech companies in basements. And they're saying like the basement was worth like 20, 30, 40 million dollars, I don't remember. It's like, how are you gonna build in a basement if the basement is worth that amount, you know? Like, so expensive, it's so hard. And I think that's an advantage for Latin America. We have, just your run rate here is much longer. The costs are different. So I also think that makes it very, very interesting. And sometimes, you know, you put a lot of emotions and you put a lot of sweat and sacrifices to an idea or a project that you have. But I think it's once you're inside the hurricane of a tech company and you've seen how fast it moves and how challenging it is, you also need to understand how fast the world changes, you know, and if you don't have that clear, then you're not going to be a person that is in a position to be adaptable. And I think it's super important to adapt and super important to change course, because that's the world we live in, you know. Especially now that you have such big incumbents in many sectors, you know, all of the top tech companies in the world, you know, with just doing like this, they can start a new business. It's not hardware, it's software. They already have the users, so they can be in your sector extremely, extremely fast.